Hello, friend. Season
4.
The Mystical American Patriot Society is transmitting to you from a high desert encampment on the frontier of our agrarian hoplite republic. This is a variety program for happy warriors who are getting some seriously bad vibes from the deranged post-Christian technocracy. Grab a tankard of yak's milk and join us by the campfire as Sumo and Kavi return to shake your surveillance, expel your parasites, and generally have a good time. Are you ready? Stand by.
Mystical American Patriot Society, now available in 3 dimensions.
A little bit of Miyazaki. You heard that before, Kavi?
I have, but I couldn't tell you which movie it's from.
It's from Spirited Away.
Yeah, I need to watch that.
What now?
That's been on my list of things I need to watch for years.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm not doing it justice at all, but the Miyazaki films are good. People like anime because it's sincere. And Western media has stopped being sincere a long time ago. You're going to hear a big clash. There you go. You should always put away your instruments in a way that they go bonk. Hello, everybody. Today we're having a wonderful day. Kavi, you remember last time on the last show how at the end of it, for people that weren't on the paywall, that weren't behind the paywall, I'm sorry, we established the ability to have trans-universal communication. Do you remember that?
Not at all.
Really?
Trans-universal. Oh, yeah, geez. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah. Trans-universal
recorded separately.
What?
So you threw me first. We recorded that part separately, so I was confused.
Oh, yeah. No, trans-universal communication. Anyway, what happened was I've been having this theory for a while. Having to kill Smokestack's AI again brought up so many memories of him that I just, necessity is the mother of invention, they say, but I believe that love is the mother of invention, actually. And my love of Smokestack got me thinking, and I thought, is there any way I currently don't know how to raise the dead or clones, especially clones that have been melted in a fire. But maybe there's an infinite amount of universes, they say. I could find the person that Smokestack was cloned from in an alternate universe. And we could have a friendship again. And I succeeded. It was very difficult. I haven't figured out how to send anything but packets of information. Sending matter is going to be difficult. One day, perhaps we can bring him through to this universe, but right now that's not possible. But I did find he doesn't go. I mean, he's going by this now. Since I told him, he was actually going by James, just James. But he's in an alternate dimension, an alternate universe, not dimension. You know, dimensionality. People get this wrong. Marvel movies, dimensions are like this, like, you know, X, Y, Z coordinates. He's in an alternate universe, right? And there's so many of them. It's very complicated. I don't want to get into all the details, but basically, I found that this person who I based the original clones off of. He's born a little later in this timeline, so that I could, because the last one was born from the 1940s, and that's how I had to. Anyway, my point is, he's recording a show sometimes there with that universe's version of Duke of Alba, and that's very good. And it's, you would think, hey, that's not going to be relevant to us, except this universe is so close to our own universe that basically all the same stuff is happening. And I scoured a lot of universes to try and get a perfect match. It's very difficult, but infinity is a large number, and there's a lot of universes. And the only difference is, I think, so far that I've been able to tell between their universe and ours, is that Donald Trump is Donald K. Trump, and the K seems to stand for coriander with a K, which is spelled weird. And they call they don't have a word for vineyards, so they just call it grape orchards and olive orchards. They don't have a separate word for vineyard. That's the only two differences. And so everything else going on seems to be very, very similar. And they have some very nice. I just asked them. I've been talking privately with James, who's now going by Smokestack for our benefit, in private. And we had a very, it's very difficult when you tell someone, hey, your friend from a different universe, and they're like, oh, really? That takes a long time for them to buy that part, right? A long time of you like giving, evidentiary proofs and explaining things, and then being like, oh yeah, what's my favorite color? And you have to tell them and tell me what I did in second grade and so on. And then it makes it even more difficult when they ask, well, what happened? Can I talk to myself? And I have to be like, well, I have to go into the fact that I murdered him, and it's the whole thing. It took a while I'm saying gaining trust is hard. And so he wasn't willing to come on yet in this personage, but I was able to listen in on he and Duke of Alba's program, and occasionally I'll pipe it in to our universe just to see. I think they have good, even though it's in a world of Donald K. Trump and orchards instead of vineyards, I think still they have some very useful takes for our universe. Kavi, does it all make sense, or was that too complicated?
Too complicated.
Too complicated? You're very quiet. Did you step away?
Trust that you.
There you are. What don't you trust?
I'll trust that you'll make it work somehow.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, Kavi, today, I'm going to pipe their podcast in. At the end of this episode, I'll open up the Trans Universal Gateway again, as we did on the thing, and I will pipe in their podcast for everyone to love and enjoy. And the great thing about it is you can be as mean as you want in the comments. They can't actually. They can never actually access them. So it doesn't matter. You can call them any names you want, or it doesn't matter. They can never ever see it. They're way past the event horizon. But before that, I want to talk about the fertility crisis, homosexuality, hippies, and I think maybe drop one of the most profound things about the nature of God that's ever been said at the end. Kavi, what do you think of this picture here I have? My collage. I made a collage.
It's not gay enough.
It says, you're not gay enough. For those just listening, it's a picture of, there's some pride parades here. There's some hippies. There's some people in
at least 20% more gay.
Yeah, there's people in like period clothing of like 15th century, 16th century. There's a picture of the guy that was Bronze Age perverts profile picture for ages, and there's a picture of Jesus in the corner. And what got me thinking about this was Bronze Age pervert. Who are you familiar with? Bronze Age pervert, Kavi? How familiar are you with him?
I have tried to read his book like 3 times, and I just can't get through it because of all the bad spelling and stuff.
Yeah, he adopts a personality that can't speak well on purpose, which is a strange move to make it as a published author that is like, I can't speak the English language. But he succeeded. My point being that what he recently talked about was he was addressing the fertility crisis and all the ways that everything people are doing is not working. You know, what people suggest isn't happening. Like they'll say, well, if we give parents more daycare money, mothers more maternity leave, if we have more schooling options, if this and that, if the price of living comes down, oh, it's contraception, oh, it's access to abortion, it's pornography, it's all the litany of things that people say, hey, this is why people aren't having babies. And as I pointed out on the show before numerous times, there's a counterexample to everything you might want to say. The Japanese fertility rate crashed decades before they made birth control legal or had ready access to abortion. There are countries in Europe which have tons of maternity leave and tons of all this free stuff and healthcare, worse fertility rate than America. There's the highly Catholic countries, Korea, for example, in the gutter, maybe the worst fertility rate of anyone in the world right now that I can think of. So there's really nothing, everything people say is like, well, but not really. But here's an idea. What if men simply are too straight? What do you think about that, Kavi? And bear with me, people. This is actually going to make sense. What do you think about that, Kavi? What if men are too straight? Shocking. What if Smokestack in his other universe is too straight? What if he's too straight? He's not going to like this episode because it's going to go against some of his fundamental aesthetic convictions, not moral necessarily, but aesthetic convictions, as it will for many people, I suspect. But Kavi, my point here is when I have this collage of things and it says you're not gay enough, the homosexual heterosexual solution to the fertility crisis. My point is this, Kavi. Well, let's think about my point here in a minute. But look at all this color. Look at all this color. Someone I brought this up in our lovely Telegram channel for all the paying subscribers. It's a lower tier than people that are citizens, and we've had some people join the micronation. Thank you so much for that. We even have our first baby, Kavi, and of course, MAPS does. The Mystical America does its citizenship not by birthright but by conception right, because we treat the human being from conception. So if you think about it, birthright and celebrating birthdays is a very sort of pagan idea, and it reinforces the idea that humanity begins at birth. We don't do that in Mystical America. We do it from conception. So we actually have one of our new citizens is pregnant, and that means that they get their child gets. We already have listen to me. The micronation I just founded already has a higher fertility rate than most of the world. I just founded it, and it's already doing better. It's like less than a week old, and already the fertility rate is through the roof. It's incredible. It's incredible. Do you know how many? That's like 1/3 of the population is pregnant. That's amazing. What if we had that in it's. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. But I brought this concept up, this idea brought about by Bronze Age perverts, fertility cults idea, and the idea that maybe there needed to be. Well, his was a suggestion that perhaps people should celebrate male sexuality as a way to up the fertility crisis, correct the fertility crisis. And people didn't like this, especially conservatives, because it's like no one likes that idea, actually. Because, feminists on the left like male sexuality scary. And then on the right, people like male sexuality sinful and blah, 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 blah. And someone in our chat was being like, well, what we need to do is take the rainbow back, take the rainbow back from people who have it. And I said, well, you can't really take, how are you going to take the rainbow back when all you want to wear is brown? And this is fundamentally very, very true. So I said, there's this thing. Here's trad masculinity on the right here. This is what it looks like. There's a guy, a handyman, and there's like a communist picture of people in a factory. A real picture of people in a factory, people wearing top hats, and like I guess a Catholic procession. A guy wearing tactical gear, and they're all wearing basically earth tones all the time. There's no frills. There's no anything. The top hat, this is from like the 1920s. The top hat is like the best thing they got going. And that's very, sort of, it's square. It's a black square. It's not very fancy, but it's a little something. And then you look over here on the left at what I'm calling BAPist, Bronze Age pervert masculinity. And you have the conquistadors. You have the Vikings. You have the Cavaliers. You have King Henry VIII, you have the Roman legions and the Anglo-Saxons, and they're all wearing humongously fancy, brilliant pompadours. They've got feathers in their caps. They've got colored sashes. They've got robes. They've got, they're wearing the rainbow all over their bodies. The Roman centurion has a plume of feathers on his head. It's incredible how like fancy and ornate men used to dress. And now they do this. Is this making any sense, Kavi? Are you starting to get are you starting to pick up what I'm putting down?
Yes, but I just wear black and a bit of white.
Well, you're a cat. Cats have a different sexuality.
I need some accessories.
Have you ever seen cats in a mating ritual? It's very disturbing.
Yes.
It's very disturbing. I'm not, no shade. Each species has their own thing. It's just not for me. Okay, but look, so here's what happened. A good argument can be made, and indeed I will make it, that modern masculinity has lost all confidence in itself, all self-confidence, as evidenced by their dress, most importantly. So in the old times, I would say before 1750, it went a little past that, but let's say 1750, men dressed in a peacocking way, like they were covered in colors, feathers, frills, all kinds of things. They stressed leisure, piracy, ? Yes, a little bit, like just taking stuff. Like there's not a lot of people.
I don't want to be a pirate.
I don't want to be. There's very few of the people that founded the West, quote unquote, when the West was at its growth phase, taking over the world, sailing the high seas, doing all the things people now complain about when it was rising, and they're now like, oh, it's declining. Yeah. Those guys were dressed in extremely flamboyant, what we would consider now gay ways. Like look at this guy. This guy, a cavalier up here with his blue sash and a red feather coming out of his hat. I mean, this guy, he's got long hair, and this is how they actually dressed. This guy is over here. He's literally taking part in taking over the world, and he's dressed like the most flaming person that's ever been on fire. Like the most flaming person that's ever been on fire is this fellow here. Okay. That's something to think about, because when society's in decline, people are dressed like this guy down here in his t-shirt, or this guy here in his overalls. None of these people have the self-confidence to wear a feather in their hat. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni, right? Because they used to just do that. They'd put feathers all over themselves. They'd have fancy lace, all this crazy stuff. And you don't do that anymore. And you think that, and this guy in the comment section, again, much love. I love all of our listeners. But he said, his quote was, when I pointed this out, he says, those were all foofs. meaning like gay men. Men look like this, and he posted a picture from the 1800s, well after they stopped doing this, of men in the frontier looking drab and boring, and also in black and white. And none of them even bothered to smile for a photo. Let me tell you something. These guys over here, this Viking fellow with his plaid pants, he would have smiled for a photo. Absolutely. This centurion here with his big feathered hat, after he gutted 7 people, he would smile for a photo. Of course he would. He would want to look his best. Unfortunately, it's probably true, or at least a little correct, to say that what we call trad masculinity, which is not, as I'm trying to point out to you, not super trad, it's only traditional for like, less than 100 years, is capitalist conditioned. Karl Marx. It's capitalist conditioned masculinity, which is why nobody likes it. This is why the feminists are always attacking masculinity, because they're like, well, this is masculinity, is me being boring. And, I mean, look, they were like peacocking, leisure, piracy, self-confident, physical presence, and comfortable with violence. That was BAPist masculinity. Okay, they had tremendous physical presence. They were just like, here I am. Look at me. And over here you have what we would call, let's say 1950s masculinity, which everyone wants to return to with a V. Their dependability, employment, hierarchical, simulated violence. They do a lot of simulated violence. They go to the range, they do karate, they do the MMA, a lot of simulated violence, but they never engage in violence without consent. So it's a question of, these guys over here probably didn't go to the shooting range as much because they just shot people. And I'm not suggesting that you shoot people at all. I'm just saying, I think a lot of the practice of violence that modern men engage in is trying to assert something that they do not have, which is the actual, whatever it was that was the sort of raw masculinity that made these guys over here wearing a feather, very willing to stab people. I got in an argument about the Shroud of Turin the other day, as I frequently do, because I'm not a fan. I did a whole episode on that. Whatever. If it helps you, God bless. But the guy said to me, he said, this is what he says to me. He says, well, one of the reasons it's true, it could be real, is because look at the way the blood splatter is from the wounds on the shroud. Medieval people didn't have that much of a knowledge of anatomy to do that, is what he says. And so I says to him, again, what are you talking about? Do you think medieval people were unfamiliar with how blood came out of bodies? That's crazy. They were so familiar with blood coming out of bodies, be it animals, which they butchered all their own, or other people, which they not unfrequently stabbed. So much so that they went around with metal on their faces, right? You don't go around with metal on your face. Most of the people that go to the shooting range and wear the tactical gear have never actually hurt anybody. And they would freak out and kind of panic if they got stabbed, right? This centurion with feathers on his hat, he would not freak out if he was stabbed. He wouldn't enjoy it, but you probably didn't get to be a centurion without being stabbed at least a couple times. He knew about it. They like to, it's this great, I blend in. That's like what these people talk about. The trad man, I'm a gray man. I want to be, so I'm situationally aware, Whereas the actual people that conquered the world were like, no, look, I'm wearing bright blue. Hello. I'm wearing bright blue. Stab, right? That's kind of what the difference is. And my point is that this masculinity is like what you need for a society where everyone is a 9-to-5 slave. And this one over here is what you need when everyone is free and doing really whatever the heck they want. Like whatever they wanted. They're like, let's sail. Let's see. I'm going to sail across the ocean. And if I get somewhere, I'm just going to say it's mine. And we'll make up our own rules and whatever. And people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. Go for it. Have fun. Whereas this is like, what the HR department told me no. This. I'm just pointing out a thing here. Look, So this is for the expanding civilization over here, this old masculinity where everyone's wearing a fancy cap. And this is for working 9 to 5. Great replacement, you say to me, but the great replacement of the West. But I say to you, what about the great male renunciation, which is a real historical concept? They never talk about it in school. Here's the Wikipedia page for it. This is the period at the end of the 18th century, so the end of the 1700s, in which Western men ceased from using bright colors, elaborate shapes, and variety in their dress. And that became exclusively the domain of women. As a guy in 1930 put it, he was a British psychologist, John Flegel. He said it was a major turning point in the history of clothing in which, quote, men abandoned their claim to be considered beautiful and henceforth aimed at only being useful. Isn't that interesting? Men abandoned their claim. Who among us was ever even raised to think of the idea of associating the word beauty with a man, right? Unless you were gay. Okay, do you see where I'm going with this? The self-confidence and this is why people say, not without reason, and this gets a lot of flack from conservative people. Liberals will be like stunning and brave. They're stunning and brave when a man puts on a dress or goes on RuPaul's Drag Race or whatever they're doing. And they're like, oh, it's stunning and brave. Look at me with my technical gear. I'd run into the cave and shoot Osama bin Laden. You know, that's real bravery or whatever. And it's first of all, you probably wouldn't run into the cave to shoot Osama bin Laden. And secondly, it is
he wasn't even in the cave.
What now?
Secondly, he wasn't even in the cave.
Secondly, he wasn't even in the cave. Right. But anyway, my point being, it does require a certain kind of courage to step outside in something that says, look at me. I saw a man trying to be a woman in the airport not long ago. And this person was huge. I don't mean fat. I mean extraordinarily tall, wearing a green dress with maybe their real hair, maybe a wig, maybe a combination of both. I don't know. And although it was obviously not working, is first I'll say. It was obviously, no one was fooled. There was no passing going on. Okay, first of all. But as ridiculous as the sight was, there is an element of courage of being like, because unless you're completely deluded, and some of the people are, to say, everyone's going to stare at me and I don't care. I don't care if everyone stares at me, you know? There is an element of that, and everyone saying there isn't just goes out wearing the simplest "Don't look at me" t-shirt possible. This guy here, pretending that he's courageous at the shooting range, but if he's not going to wear a colorful shirt because that's too much attention. Maybe he'd shoot somebody, maybe, but he ain't going to wear a colorful shirt. That's too much attention. Do you see the problem? Here's a guy over here. This is Luis Francisco de la Cerrada in what is basically a crazy, lavishly red dress that kind of flares out like a skirt. It's like an overcoat. It's 1684. He's wearing the long wigs that British judges still kind of wear. He's got like a bow tie on, a frilly cravat, a cane. This is how men of means. Now, of course, this was an expensive outfit. Not everyone could afford it, but people that had money, any man that had money at all, above just buying a frock, tried to dress as elaborately as possible. That's just a historical fact. They tried to dress as elaborately and say, look at me as possible. This guy here does kind of look like, by our modern definitions, a foof. He does, but he probably would be way more quick to stab you than any of the guys at the tactical range. Almost certainly. Because he has confidence. He's like, look at me. Look at me. The Industrial Revolution, again, the Great Male Renunciation began in the mid-18th century, which is conveniently when the Industrial Revolution happened. And you know what? You can't work in a factory wearing long hair, wigs, and frilly coats, can you? No, you can't, right? And it's really convenient. What I'm saying is that your definition of masculinity, even the trad types, has been conditioned by material technological circumstances, and not by religious moral codes or objective senses of aesthetics, right? But you've been conditioned essentially by capitalism, which is one of my most Marxist points, but it's true. To work in a factory, you can't dress like Luis Francisco de la Carrada. You can't dress like him. You have to dress like, your grandpa did. But why would anyone want to have sex with people who aren't beautiful? Right? They abandon their claim to be beautiful. Why would anyone want to? And so what they've done is, since then, to make up for this, well, I'll get back to that in a minute. But take the rainbow back, they say. But what would you do with it? Look at these pictures of people from suburbia and modern urban life as well, not just suburbia. We've got a white SUV. That is actually a Suburban, I think, a white Chevy Suburban. We've got a white man here wearing just slacks and a business casual outfit. We've got a modern home, living room, dining room, open concept, because everything has to be open. God forbid we have walls between rooms or countries or anything or genders. Everything's open. And it's beige and white and black. And here's an office, and it's brown with gray chairs. Right? So take back the rainbow, but what would you do with it? The rainbow would be wasted on you. It's true. Very, very few of you have any self-confidence to even drive a bright red car, much less, like, what do you do? Everyone paints their walls beige. Everything is so earth tones because it's safe. No one's going to make fun of you or look at you if you're gray, if you're a gray man, where no one's going to, Kavi, one time I went to I used to go out. I don't do it anymore, but I would go out wearing only a kimono, a summer kimono, and I don't live in Japan. And it's green with the Great Wave painting on it, printed in various ways. And I'd be wearing sandals and a kimono walking around. And let me tell you something. A lot of people look at you when you're pumping gas in a kimono. Can you imagine?
I can imagine.
Yeah, a lot of people do. But I was the most colorful person at the Shell gas station by a mile. By a mile. 7 miles. 7 miles. Sometimes I stopped wearing it mostly because it became too thin. It's kind of. I need a new one. But I would be out there. I wouldn't even wear undergarments because it was sufficient. It was just a big kimono, just that and sandals. And here I am. The most people will do now sometimes is men will wear cowboy boots. That's like the fanciest they'll get. And they put their jeans over the cowboy boots where all the stitching is. The fanciest piece of clothing that a modern man wears in America with any kind of regularity, not like a special occasion, is cowboy boots, some of them. And the fancy part of that is all the fancy stitching work they do up along the boot, along the heel and shin portion, and then they put their jeans over it to hide it. Women took their jeans inside their boots so you can see all the fanciness. And then they're like, I don't want to look fancy. Let me cover my boot. So what would you do with the rainbow? You would do nothing with it. It would be wasted. It's the reign of beige. This is the reign of beige. And beige civilizations don't conquer the world. Beige civilizations do spreadsheets. And they punch time cards and they send emails. They do not conquer the world because it's beige. Here's car colors by year since 1990. It's a graph. You can see it's a very nice graph because I like to have a legend where it says the purple is for purple, the blue is for blue. because we're talking about color, so you can just make the color what you're talking about. Very great legend for a graph. But as you can see, there was a brief explosion of color in the mid-1990s where we briefly got over 50% of cars coming out that were not white, black, or gray. But since then, basically 80% of cars, a little less, are white, black, or gray. Sometimes people go red or blue, but anything else is out. Anything else is like, there's like one car in 1,000 that's green, one car in 1,000 that's yellow. And you think about even at least guys in the 1950s had the self-confidence to drive a hot rod and it would be like pink. You know, that's some self-confidence there. You don't even have that. You're like, I don't know how to drive a pink car. I want to be, I drive my beige SUV. Why doesn't anyone want to have sex with me? That's a good, I drive my beige SUV. Why doesn't anyone want to have sex with me? Good question. They abandoned their claim to be considered beautiful and henceforth aimed at only being useful. Here's modern dad clothes. It's some jorts with sneakers and white ankle socks. And here's classic dad outdoor party outfit. He's got a baseball cap. The one hat everyone wears. They only have one hat. There used to be a plethora of hats. So many hats. So many different kinds of hats. Now there's one, the baseball cap. And they don't even have the courage to turn it around backwards anymore. At least in the 90s, they could turn it around backwards. They don't even do that. They stick it on there, and it has a nice, respectable bend in the brim. And they wear the cargo shorts, a polo shirt, socks with sandals, the same kind of sunglasses, and that's it. What is this? What are you guys going to do with the rainbow? Look at this. Look at these people. These people don't deserve the rainbow. And that's the point. You have to be worthy of the rainbow if you want to take it back. But see, in actuality, my friends, here's a picture of a lion with a glorious mane blowing in the wind. In actuality, my friends, in state of nature, and this is BAP's point, it is almost always the male which lays first claim to beauty. Almost always. Here's some pictures of animals, the male and female together. Here's a, here's a sea lion. Look at his giant snout. Here's orangutans. He's got those huge face pads. This is, what is this?
Donald Trump chicken?
Yeah, there's a pheasant there. And the male, female. Here's the yellow-tipped butterfly. Only the male has yellow tips. This is the female. Here's the male baboon. The female. Here's a male cardinal, bright red, and the brown female. This is how nature works, actually, because females are universally attracted to flamboyance. This is a fact of nature, as reliable as anything Aquinas ever said about natural law. Females are universally attracted to flamboyance, which is one reason why gay men have so many female followers and female clappers. They go, yay, because at least some man somewhere is trying to look nice. I mean, right? At least some man somewhere is trying to look nice. He may not be into me, but at least he's proving it's possible. He's proving it's possible that a man somewhere would try to look fancy, like the baboon does, or the orangutan, or the cardinal, or the pheasant, or any number of other ones. There's so many examples of this. In nature, it is almost always the case that if one of the sexes, if there's sexual dimorphism, and one of them looks fancier than the other, it's the male. The big exception that comes to my mind is spiders, and you don't want to be a spider. Spiders are scary and kind of gross, right? Must we return? Here's a picture. They got the modern world and the old world. People, and this is what bugs me. People, and they recognize this need in architecture. Like, why don't we build things nice and fancy, and like take some time to make some doorknobs that look good and whatever. You don't even put on a colorful shirt, man. What are you talking about? When a society, a society of people like you aren't going to build a fancy building because you don't even care about your own fanciness. Where's this going to come from? This sudden urge to be beautiful. If you don't have it in yourself, where's it going to come from in society? They're just going to poof it out of the air like, oh, we suddenly care about beauty, but not about, ourselves, right? Beauty cannot only be the domain of women. It cannot only that's not what happened. That's not how this works. Okay, the people that built all the cities, like the ancient areas of Florence and ancient Rome and Vienna and all of them, Paris. I mean, look at the Arc de Triomphe. This is one reason people hate Trump. I mean, there's lots of reasons. I'm not saying this is the only one, but the man is gaudy in a way that reads kind of gay to modern people. He really is. He like has this crazy fan. He wanted to build an Arc de Triomphe and like Napoleon. Look at Napoleon was wearing white tights and a big feather hat and blue and red, and all the soldiers went out there and like. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? And this here's a like a clip art of modern office workers. This isn't flamboyant. This is beige. This is the reign of beige. It doesn't make anyone want to make babies. Okay? If this female cardinal saw him and he was not bright red, she'd go, I'm not that interested. If this female pheasant saw him and he wasn't covered in yellow and blue stripes, he'd be like, I don't know. You know, this guy look at his handsome giant face things. I don't know what you call these. But he's grown this like kind of the world's most impressive sideburns on this monkey, this baboon. The world's most impressive sideburns, you know? All the males in nature try to look fancy. And you're not looking fancy, so you get gray, white rectangles instead of building ancient Spanish or Italian cities. Here's a piece from The Onion. It says it's harsh but fair. Heterosexual men's fashions. It's a guy who's a little pudgy, no body shaming, white shirt, white undershirt, and blue jeans. He's not trying to be fancy in the slightest. Not in the slightest is he trying to be fancy. And look, here's some covers. Here's some screenshots of the male lead in various women's fantasies, Hallmark movies, romance novels. They got long hair. They've got cravats on. They've got sashes. They're aristocrats from the 1800s. They're a pirate. They're a vampire wearing 1700s clothes because a guy's trying to look fancy and beautiful. Isn't that cool? That's what I want. You will not find anywhere in a female fantasy a male lead where he's dressing like this. It will not happen. He's dressing like this guy in jorts. And I'm not saying you have to dress for the female gaze all the time. I'm just saying if you're like, why don't women want to have sex anymore to make babies? Why aren't they have baby fever? Well, like, what are you giving them to work with here? You're not giving them anything to work with. And I know that there's women listening that are clapping to this because it's obviously true. Okay, look here. This is what women want. They want you. They don't want 1950s factory worker. They want fancy aristocrat that cared enough to have gold leaves on his collar and had the self-confidence to wear it. Right? I mean, this is, almost all women's romance involves the fantasy that men try to be beautiful again. 100%. These people back they didn't have any problems with fertility. These people, none, zero. And it wasn't simply this female narrative, the feminist narrative, like, oh, well, females were slaves. That's not true, actually. These guys just had a lot more sex appeal. And when women were around them, they're like, yeah, I'm willing to throw caution to the wind. I'm willing to throw caution to the wind and have a baby. Yes, they had less rights, granted. But a huge part of it is all these guys had far much more sex appeal. This Viking guy with his plaid pants and blue cape, so much sexier than guy in overalls and a t-shirt tactical guy. So much sexier. And so anyway, and here's a problem. This is a tangential problem, but I wanted to include this because I'm healing the fertility crisis. I'm healing the gender wars. I'm healing all of it. This is snippets of a Substack article that I didn't write. Fella wrote it. And he's talking about Tolkien's letter to his son about marriage. And this, I included this because it had so many likes and retweets and whatever. And a lot of men were clapping for it and say, yeah, this is what we got to do. But imagine, here's Tolkien with his wife Edith, and she's looking at him like, oh, I love him so much. And he's looking at the camera. And this is what he writes to his son. Decades after he's been married to his wife. He says, men are not monogamous. No good pretending. Men just ain't, not by their animal nature. Monogamy, although it has long been a fundamental of our inherited ideals, is for us men a piece of revealed ethic, according to faith and not flesh. The essence of the fallen world is that the best can be attained by free enjoyment, or what is called self-realization. Usually a nice name for self-indulgence. But instead, we believe in denial and suffering. Faithfulness in Christian marriages entails that great mortification. Imagine your wife who thinks you love her reading this letter to your son, 20, who's a grown adult now, and you've given him so many children and all the best years of your life. And he says, listen, I never liked being with one woman. And actually, marriage is a great mortification, which mort means death. It's a great self-denial. It's not fun. It's bad. He goes on to say, for Christian men, there is no escape. Marriage may help to sanctify and direct to its proper object, his sexual desires. Its grace may help him in this struggle, but the struggle remains. It will not satisfy him, as hunger is kept off by regular meals. It will offer as many difficulties to the purity of soul proper to the state as it provides easements. I mean, like, what? Imagine being his wife and reading this. And so many trad men, so many Catholic men and others were retweeting like, yeah, this is basically the message is marriage sucks. What I actually want to do is bang a bunch of whores, but for some higher ideal, you cannot blame modern women for being how they are if this is the attitude that resonates with the majority of men, right? Like, what a woman wants is someone who will love her, for who she is for her life and be satisfied with that. That's what they would like to happen. I'm not saying every one of them. Of course, there are women that enjoy sleeping around, yada, yada. But in general, that's what women want. This is why the fantasy of women is one fancy, strong, confident man who likes her. He doesn't go around and sleep with a bunch of other women. That's a man's fantasy that there's a ton of, that's not what they want. And he's saying, everyone's applauding this Tolkien quote of like, yeah, well, marriage sucks. And, he goes on to say in this letter, like, hey, we're not really the whole concept of soulmates. Why? You have to believe me. It is possible to like your wife, to love your wife, and to enjoy spending time with her. Like, what in the world are you guys even doing? The West does not deserve to be saved if it's a bunch of beige people unwilling to be gay enough to have sex with a woman. The West does not deserve to be saved if it's a bunch of beige men unwilling to be gay enough to have sex with a woman. Unwilling to see it as anything but like, I just can't imagine being like, hey, this marriage thing is awful, but it's like our sacred duty. Like, what woman would want that? Why would that be a selling point to anything? There is actually the ability within you to commit to one woman and be completely satisfied with that in your life, and to love and develop a tremendous soul bonded relationship that lasts your whole life. That's possible. And everyone be like, well, no, it's just, I'm not saying women are innocent in the whole gender war thing, because they also have their problems. But like, guys, look in a mirror. Look in a beige mirror at yourself with no self-confidence. You don't bother with anything. And then you say, well, when I do get a wife, it's sort of like mortification of the flesh. What? What's wrong with you? Stop it. Stop it. Tolkien could have benefited for being a little gayer. I don't mean homosexual necessarily, but like dressing in flamboyant clothes. I mean, this is a suit and tie, but that's like, I mean, it's brown, and a suit and tie is not very flamboyant. It's like the standard bog uniform, bog standard. But look at what's the last time. Look at the last time white people had a lot of heterosexual sex, the hippies. Because what happened? Men dared for a brief moment in time to be flamboyant again. For a brief moment in time, they dared to be flamboyant again. And they actually had the rainbow. Do you see? There wasn't a lot. There were gay people in the hippie movement, of course. But the gay movement as a movement didn't exist because they had no rainbow, because the straight people had the rainbow. Do you see? You see how it works? All the flamboyancy was already taken. It was already taken by straight men who were having sex with women, who were like, this is great. Look, I've got a man who's shirtless and he's not fat and he's wearing a colorful bandana and necklaces and he's got long hair. And this guy's wearing a beanie on his head full of colors and he's banging a drum. He's got no pants on. This guy's wearing, like, these people, you can call them whatever you want. They had a lot more sex with women than is currently happening in our society or in the 1950s. A lot of heterosexual sex happens when straight men get a little more gay, meaning flamboyant, meaning having the self-confidence to actually wear a rainbow. As an aside, this is Ken Westerfield. Are you familiar with Ken? He's that guy in the picture up here.
Nope.
With the frisbee. This is the guy. He's the OG hippie, and he's the one you owe the frisbee to. Everybody, thank your local hippie. They gave you the frisbee.
Invented the frisbee.
He did the frisbee. There were flying discs beforehand, but he turned it into. He was the one that had the first like factory to make them and sell them. And he's the one that popularized disc golf and ultimate frisbee. He's like the inventor of those things. Here he is with his dog. And he was in the hippie movement. Don't say the hippies never did anything. I love Ken Westerfield. He's a pretty cool guy. Here he is as an older man, because that was a long time ago. This is black and white photos. Still got his frisbee, still got a dog. Probably not the same dog, let's be honest. Looks like the same, close to the same breed. But that dog would be a very old dog at this point. But he's got a frisbee, and he had Discraft was his company. They still exist, and they still make quality discs. The hippies actually did stuff. No one wants to admit it, but the boomers actually were pretty cool. A lot of boomer hate is boomer envy that you don't have the confidence to drive a rainbow van with a naked woman painted on it. That's a lot of boomer hate is you don't have the confidence to drive a rainbow van with a naked woman painted on it and you're jealous. But you can have that confidence. Get your kimono, wear it around. No one, it's not illegal. You can do it all day long. The 1960s also, I kind of have a soft spot for the 1960s myself. I think they will come to be the defining decade of the 20th century. When people think about like the 1500s, and it's really like a small piece of the 1500s comes to define the whole century. It's true of any century. And I think that looking back centuries from now, if the world is still here, the 1960s will be like what people envision the whole 20th century is looking like. Because look at these people. Look at the Beatles. Look at this random guy with his wife and their kid when they were having sex and making babies because he's dressed like a crazy rainbow person. And so is she. And everyone's having fun. No one's having fun anymore. This guy in his jorts isn't having any fun. He's serious. He's defining himself, as most trad men do, and people are taught masculinity is by being useful. He's defining himself as a utilitarian object. It is, in a way, a form of objectification. There's female objectification and there's male objectification. And male objectification is men are only objects defined by their use. And this guy is not doing that. He's saying, look at me. I'm beautiful too. And his wife liked that, and they made a nice white baby with blonde hair. But by the 2000s, the hippies were gone. They were gone. And that rainbow was just laying on the floor for anyone to take. But the only people that came and took it were the gays. And they're the only ones still trying to have fun today. I'm not, I don't think the homosexual lifestyle is good. I think it's bad. But I give them, you have to give credit where credit's due. They're the only people trying to have fun. They're the only people trying to have any fun. Look at these outfits by the 2000s. I mean, we've immediately gone to black and white. This guy, he's got green. It's Wolverine. What's his name? The guy that plays Wolverine? I don't know. Hugh Jackman. He's wearing a green shirt. That's the only piece of color. Blue jeans.
Oh, never mind.
I mean, because somehow you guys managed to make being heterosexual, having actual sex with actual women uncool. Look at these guys. The trad style primer, the Pope, the pipe, tobacco, and leisure. You guys managed to make somehow, and this secretly, all the rest of it is covering. All of the intellectual screeds, all of the journalism, all of the diatribes about yada, yada, yada. All of it is basically a way of saying you're just not cool. And I know people hate to hear that, but that is fundamentally what that's their emotional reaction to seeing this guy with a tweed jacket and a pipe and trying to be like, here's the rational reason that Aquinas gives for staying married. Like, what? Who cares? Who cares? It's supposed to be about passionate love, not about an intellectual reason that you write down in a book, you nerd. What is your problem? Right? So you guys managed to make having actual sex with actual women uncool. And that's the problem. Reject modernity. Here's the guys in cargo shorts. Embrace tradition. Look at embrace tradition and be a fancy pants. Look at these people. This is how people used to dress. Embrace tradition and be a fancy pants. Napoleon conquered most of a continent and he wore this. Do you see what I'm saying? He wore that. This is this guy over here. This is an AI rendering, I'm pretty sure, but
that's
he's
not
wearing
that colorful.
This is this guy on the top right. He's wearing this is at late 1800s, so this is after the Great Male Renunciation, and you can see it's a lot simpler, but still, this is really good. Like he's put together. He's got a little scarf on. He's got some color. He's like, look at me. He is saying, look at me. Not as much as Napoleon was. But he's doing, at least go back to that. If you can't wear a purple cape with striped pirate pants, at least go back to that. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Kavi, is this making sense to anyone? I hope so. Because, you need to hear it. You need to get out of the reign of beige. Get out of the reign of beige and actually take the rainbow back. Listen. Now I want to tell you about my revelation before I change the leptons and quarks in the engine room to pipe in a transmission from another universe. I think, Kavi, I've been thinking about this. I didn't have time to make a spreadsheet, a presentation about this one, except I put Jesus in the corner and wrote faith in himself in rainbow colors. I had this realization the other day. I was talking. Do you remember friend of show, number 15, the CEO of Earth?
Yep.
He was on a long time ago. He is the CEO of Earth secretly. He's not. It's not an elected position. It's an appointed position. So I understand if you people have never. You think someone like Klaus Schwab was running the world, but no, it's CEO of Earth, number 15. He was appointed by the Blue Avians. My point is, he used to say to me one time, we were discussing how faith works, faith healing, miracles, that sort of thing. And he said to me, in a moment of frustration, he said, I don't want it to require faith. I want it to work. And it doesn't matter if I believe in it. I think we were talking about the miracles of Jesus in the Bible. And there's a part in there where it goes, Jesus could not do miracles because the people in that that city did not believe. Okay. And that strikes people as a cop-out, because what do you mean I have to why would God require us to believe? That's the question everyone asks. Why is faith this big deal? Why wouldn't he just show us and prove it or whatever? And I got to thinking, Kavi, infinity is a very big number. It's a very big number. It's so big is infinity. And I think what people imagine the universe works as, despite all of our alleged sophistication, what I think most people have in their heads at the end of the day is this clockwork vision of the universe where the universe is ticking on by one atom bumping into another according to defined laws ad infinitum, like a giant series of billiard balls. They're floating around the universe, being heated up by energy in various forms and moved around, and they bonk into one another. And somehow, stochastically, through a great static or statistical whatever, all these very, very defined, precise calculations of billiard balls flying around the universe, hitting one another, manifests into emergent properties of color and light and animals and whatever. But it's all at base deterministic and like a clock running. It was set up, and it's what the future is kind of like. I mean, a lot of people don't even believe in free will, because how could it be? It's just one atom's going to hit another, and so forth and so on. But I was thinking, basically, that's a model of well, if you had a big enough computer, this is what people say, and they actually believe this. This is what simulation theory comes to. If you had a good enough computer with enough processing power, you could simulate the entire universe. And I got to thinking about that. And actually, I believe that, this is the realm where you speak gingerly about anything definitive, because it's frankly beyond me. But I wonder if it is even possible for even God. This may be a logical impossibility. It may be like saying God could make an apple that wasn't an apple or something. Like could God make a rock so big he couldn't lift it? Where you get in this logical circle. I think it may be a similar thing like that, because I don't think actually you could ever run the universe in a computer. I think there's simply too much of it. I think that it is basically infinite. There's an infinite amount of combinations and ways that things could happen. And infinity is very, very big. And so when you think about it, is God, and this is what I think most people think God is doing, is God up there, say God wants to, part the Red Sea, right? What do you think he's doing? Is he up there going, okay, now he's got all these controls and this giant master switch. And he's saying, okay, now I take the molecules of this water and I move them to the left and this to the right, and then that one and that one and that one and that one. And he's like Shiva with a billion hands. He's doing all the knobs and he's pressing all the buttons, and it makes everything happen all at once. And he has full conscious knowledge of every single thing that's ever happened. And he directs them with his great control, his great control switch in the sky. John Piper thinks that, famous Calvinist. He used to say, not a mote of dust falls apart from God's exact direction. And by which he means conscious direction. And I think that may actually be impossible, on the level of can God lift a rock? So if you really follow that through. Because I don't think, not that God couldn't know all those things, but it seems so unnecessary. I think actually how God works is that God has faith in himself. And so when he asks you to have faith, it's not a random ask. He's asking you to no, this is how reality works. He's like, you think that when I said, let there be light, I was doing physics calculations to make the light? No. I just said it, and I had faith enough that it would happen that it did. Like, not that he couldn't, if he wanted to, like, know the physics or whatever, but like having that in your mind, even if your mind is infinite, that is also infinite. And so it's this kind of recursive problem. Like, I don't think it's like a computer. I don't think it's a watchmaker at all. If you rather say, no, the ground of reality is consciousness, and this is all, therefore, like God's imagination, which doesn't mean it's not real, but like that's, for want of a better word, like he's thinking it into existence, speaking it into existence. He just does it as easily as you. When you think of like a dog in your mind, you don't work out how the molecules fit together of a dog and how all its innards go. You just go dog, and you have a perfect picture of it. Or not a perfect picture, but you have a good picture of it. And maybe his image is so perfect that it actually is perfect, and it just is there. And so when he's asking you to have faith, so God, the Father, would be this all-pervasive omni-intelligence, consciousness, awareness thing that can say, let there be light, and there is light. And then his instantiation into a thing that believes in himself is the Son, Christ, right? And so Jesus, when he asks you to have faith, is not saying, it's not a random test. It's not a test of like, that you have to pass just out of arbitrariness. It's him saying, this is how the universe works, guys. God doesn't do it by calculations and computer math and tying bolts together in little atoms. He does it by having faith in himself. And the universe is actually faith-based. He just says, let there be, and there is. And what is the mechanism for that? There isn't one. It is based on faith. God has faith in himself. And that is how things happen. And so when Christ says, well, if you would want your prayers answered, you must believe and do not doubt. For if you doubt, you're double-minded. And that like conflicts with itself, because it's basically you're having faith in one direction, but also faith in the other direction. And so it cancels out. And people reject this because for many reasons. But one is that sounds too easy. Like, oh, I just believe things and it happens. Like, have you tried that? Have you actually tried that? Because it's like the hardest thing in the world to believe something that contrary to your reason. Like you think, like, oh, I know what's going to happen is what's always happened. Or, well, you look at it, you're like, oh, obviously there's hopeless. I see no way out. I don't know anything that could happen. Therefore, have you ever tried to believe something? It's one of the hardest things in the world.
That's why you have to trick yourself with like a placebo.
Right. There are ways. I think that's all occultism is a way of tricking yourself into believing it easier. That's why the placebo works. That's why like all this manifesting stuff works. Like maybe that's why acupuncture works, or maybe that's why any drug ever works. Honestly, maybe that's why anything works, is that you kind of believe. And the more people say that it works, like I was reading about some drug the other day, and this is so common on drugs. If you look at them, they go at the bottom, they said the exact pharmaceutical mechanism by which this works is not known. That's like 90% of drugs. But if people tell you it works, and enough people believes it works, it does. And then if later they stop believing it works, like medicine in the past, it doesn't work as much. And so people come up with all these ways to trick themselves into having faith, and then they get the result they want. But Christ has no need for those tricks. And he says to you, he says, listen, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, get up and be thrown into the sea, and it would happen. And have I told you a story? Have I told the story on the show, Kavi, of the time I reserved a hotel room through faith? Have I done that? I think maybe I did. Kavi's gone. Kavi, are you dead? Hello? Oh no. Oh dear. Hopefully he comes back. Hold on. Let me see, listeners. Let me message him. Kavi.
Stepped away for 2 seconds.
Oh, you stepped away at the exact wrong time. I was just asking you a question.
Know. I was trying to aim the correct time to go to the bathroom.
I said, have I told the story of when I reserved a hotel room through faith?
You must have, but I don't remember.
Okay, I'll retell it for anyone who. This is one of the. I used to work in a 2-man company, and that included me and another person because that's 2. And we had to be. It was an emergency thing. It wasn't like a medical emergency, although kind of it was. Anyway, we were called to go to the middle of the night to the coast of Florida. And we like traveled down there, and the planes, trains, and automobiles. Like, we gotta get there as fast as we can. We arrive in Florida, and it is the middle of a hurricane. I forget which one, and we have to go to the coast. On the coast, and there's storms. And if you've ever lived in a place where there are hurricanes, what happens is when a hurricane comes, everyone with their beach houses leaves. And they go inland about 100 miles, and they rent a hotel, and all the hotel rooms are booked because they think, I'll stay here, and then tomorrow I'll go see if my house is gone. And that's what they did. And so we were there. It was the middle of the night, and we had to be there very early in the morning the next day. And we were looking for, and everything was booked. There was no room in the inn. And my friend was not a very big believing type person. We tried 4 or 5 places, and he was like, well, we'll probably have to sleep in the car. And I said to him, I don't know how I said that, why I said this, but I just somehow knew. I said, the next place we go, we'll have a thing. And he said, that's ridiculous. And he called, and there was nothing. He couldn't even get through. He's like, this is impossible. I said, just come on. We drive in, and we go in. We park the car, get out of the car, walk in the door. The lady at the front desk, as we're walking in, she goes, oh, okay, no problem. Thank you. And she hangs up the phone. I says, do you have 2 rooms? And she said, you're in luck. I just hung up on the person canceling 2 rooms. And we walked in, took the 2 rooms. And I just kind of knew that would happen. I don't know. I can't pull that off on the regular. I wish I could. Or, maybe I can't. I don't know how. So far, my track record with that has not been. But if you do have faith, somehow that kind of happens. And that's very scary when it does happen, actually. Because the other thing no one wants to tell you about miracles and like doing this kind of thing is that when it happens, it scares the pants off of you. And you don't know how to react. And so a lot of the reason it doesn't happen is, 1, you don't have faith. And 2, when you do have faith, you're like, I don't want, that scared me. I don't know if I want that to happen again. And so perhaps you persist in your suffering needlessly because you don't have faith and you have fear of having faith, maybe. But my point being, I think that the ask for faith is not a random ask, as so many people portray it. It's not like an arbitrary test. It's just how the universe functions. God thinks, and it happens. He speaks, and he believes what he speaks, and it occurs. And that is the base. That's like the beyond physics. That's baser down. And you, being created in the image of God, have that same power. If you believe it and say it, it will occur. And I'm trying to get on. One day I want to get on, what's his name? Who did I say in the chat I wanted to get on? Guy.
Bledsoe or something?
No, Bledsoe too. Chris Bledsoe, who's he claims to be able to summon UFOs and work faith healings, which is great. I love that. But let me see if I can find him. Hold on. Here we go. Gordon Robertson, son of Pat Robertson of the 700 Club. Why? Because he's one of the only white people I've ever seen claim. I want to interview him about this specifically. I don't care about the 700 Club. This specific claim. Because he said, I shared this with the group. There's a YouTube clip of him. He said, most people, when they talk about faith healings, it's something very vague. Like, oh, I prayed for me and then later I felt better. It's like, maybe, who knows? He said, no, I was in India and I was preaching and giving faith healing or whatever. And I was praying over people. And people brought up to me this kid affected by polio. And his legs had grown, bent the other way. They were tucked up under him. He said, like a spider when it dies, like curled up backwards. Bones deformed and stuff. And he said, I was thinking, oh, man, what am I going to do? And he said, I stopped. I said, everyone bring up here and pray with me. And bring out the oil, and we'll anoint him with oil. And he said, I was doing this, I realized in hindsight, to try and diffuse the failure that I was sure was going to happen. This kid wasn't going to get healed. And then I could say, well, all these people also couldn't do it. And, we didn't have collective, it wasn't just me that failed. It was all of us. But he says, as I'm sitting there, I have this thing come to me. And it's just like, I felt Jesus speak to me and says, do not have faith in your prayers, even. Have just faith in me. Not even in your prayers to me, which is a weird secondary psychological thing, like meta psychology. Don't know quite what to make of that. But he says, and just do it. And Gordon Patterson, or Robertson, I mixed up Pat Robert. Gordon Patterson claims that I looked at the child and I said, stand up and walk. And I watched with my own eyes his bones uncurl and he stood up and walked. Which is an incredible claim. But man, the chutzpah to claim it. The chutzpah to claim it. And maybe it happened. I would like to have him on to claim it because I have a sneaking suspicion that the universe does in fact work like that. And that is why there's so much frustration. Primarily because at the end of the day, we are operating under an assumption of how the universe works that simply isn't. God isn't up there with his 1,000 hands of Shiva changing everything. He has faith in himself. And that's it. And that's to be like God, you must also have faith in him. To the point where when you ask for a thing, you just believe you've already, Jesus says that. He says, when you pray, he says, he doesn't say believe you will receive it. He says, believe you have received it and it will be yours, which is way harder. It's so much harder to say, I believe I've got this thing I don't see or touch or whatever. Yes, I have it. I can't see it. I can't point to it now, but I believe I have it. It's not easy at all. He says, if you can do that, it will be yours. I leave it to you, listeners. Be a little gayer, not in a gay way, so that you can have sex with women and make children and have fun, most importantly, and have faith in God because God has faith in himself. And now, Kavi, start whenever you're ready and whenever you're prepared, start the protocol. We will begin shifting the engines and shifting the signal to tap in to a podcast from another dimension. Until next time, everyone, Sumo out.
Glad to be back on the air with you, Duke.
Yeah, man, this is a good time. So, the weather's great, but maybe the current affairs aren't so great. So everyone's talking about Iran and everything that's going on over there right now. And so we figured we would sort of, I know we talked about it kind of the run up to that last time. So this is a good chance to, maybe we can just kind of flow with that topic and talk a little about what's going on in Iran. It's been really pretty wild. This started at the end of February, so it's going on, like month and a half.
Yeah. It's getting past the initially advertised timeline, which is, I think, to be expected. But I had kind of an idea of what we can do here. About a week and a half ago, I wrote my thesis down about energy politics and what's really going on in Iran and all this stuff. And subscribers to the Telegram channel have already heard some of that because I was, spurging out in there with giant walls of text about my genius theory. But it's got a little age on it. There's a little water on the bridge. So I thought we might just kind of take it a point at a time. I'll go through a point, and then maybe you can bat it around, you can respond, you can push back, tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right. You want to go back and forth like that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool. All right. So let me start with the starting conditions here. The Sunni petrostates and Israel together, I think, went to Trump and basically said that they were going to launch a decapitation strike on Iran, and sort of in a way to say, hey, heads up, because we know what they're going to do in this scenario. They're going to launch missiles. They're going to attack, us and all your assets in the region at the same time, and they're going to close a strait. So that's been known forever that was going to be the case in this scenario. So they decided they were going to launch this decapitation strike, and they believed, I think Israel and the Sunni states believed, that the resulting closure of Hormuz would cause oil price to spike so badly that it would create this politically intolerable situation for Trump. He would then have to, boots on the ground, invade Iran and do regime change that we've seen us do in the past. Same basic model. To do regime change in order to relieve this energy crisis that was going to be ensuing as a result of the conflict. So that's my opening conditions. That's what I think the Sunni Gulf states and Israel thought they were going to achieve when they started this off. What do you think, Duke?
Yeah, I think that definitely sounds very plausible to me, and it's good pointing out because the information warfare landscape being what it is, particularly in domestic American and Western European politics, that the role of Israel in this is obvious, but what is often goes unmentioned is the role of the Gulf states in this, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Emirates, which are just as big and significant, potentially even more so than the Israelis. And that just seems to get glossed over for whatever reason. They certainly have very strong national interest in seeing the Iranian government be removed, and that obviously they can't do it themselves. So we would hope that they could get the Americans mostly to do the heavy lifting, but they've been supportive of it the whole time, and people forget that. So
yeah, I'm glad you emphasized that the Sunni states and Israel have a lot of the same interests, and often work together more closely than I think is commonly understood, and they certainly don't try to advertise the fact that they work pretty closely together, but they actually do. So that kind of brings to point two is Trump's real positions, his real motivations. So I'll start by saying Trump's primary interests in this whole thing are not preventing Iran from getting a nuke, not reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and not defending Israel or the Sunni Gulf states from attack. He is putting forward that those are his interests for reasons that maybe I'll explain in a minute. But what I'm going to say are his actual interests are as follows. One, and this is the most important, or one of the most important things in this whole theory, is that Trump hates China and considers them our number one adversary for reasons he's been very clear about for a long time. Remember the Chinese virus?
Yeah.
He hates them. He takes every opportunity to poke at them. And I think that it's more than just campaign sloganeering and having a convenient enemy. He has demonstrated that he has a very good understanding of the sort of economic irregular political warfare undermining activities that China's been doing for a long time, and he's talked about it in numerous ways. Anything from stealing U.S. IP to drug trafficking, drug intermediate chemicals, and so forth. He's got a lot of different beefs with China, and I think they add up to he views them as the number one enemy. Any comment on that? You think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. If you look at, I know last time we talked about the national security strategy, and it's all over that.
Yep.
And if you follow national, like particularly U.S. military discussion. If you follow, it's an, I won't say even an open secret, but because it isn't really a secret. But the Chinese, for example, Xi Jinping put forward publicly that 2027 would be the year that they probably attack Taiwan, right? So that it then recover Taiwan back into China, and so that is taken very seriously in the U.S. military and the U.S. national security community, and so in military strategy, and they talk about shaping operations. So in the event that if the Chinese are serious about that, and they're gonna make that kind of move, then as a U.S. government, first of all, you want to deter that, and get them to think that that would be a bad move. And secondly, if you can't deter it, then you want to do shaping operations so that when the day comes, that as many cards are stacked in the deck to your favor, like control of energy routes, for example, or so that's all part of it. Also, another side of it would be trying to convince the Chinese that maybe your military calculus, and the belief in the U.S. circles is that the Chinese are very plan driven, that they are not that flexible. Like they'll have a very methodical approach to a plan. Like we have these at least semi quantifiable assumptions about our opponent, and when we hit certain thresholds, then that means it's go time. So one thing would be to convince them, well, your math doesn't math, right? Like as the kids say these days, right? The math is not mathing, because these systems that you think can do X, Y, and Z, we're going to demonstrate to you that they can't, right? So like,
okay. Do you think some of that has occurred in Iran right now?
Absolutely. So like so that both in Venezuela and in Iran, the Chinese sold air defense radars and associated systems that are specifically, they're kind of cutting edge. Now they probably have something somewhat better, but the selling points of these is that we can detect American stealth aircraft and fire at them, within the ranges that they would need to come to attack you. So we can take that advantage for them off the board. And then, so what actually happened was they didn't shoot any aircraft down. It's, there was the one F-15, one airplane got shot down, and that was way after the initial strikes. And I don't think it wasn't it may have been like a short range missile that did it, but in any case, like they pretty much proved that those systems do not in fact detect American stealth fighters, or at least what was the joke on the internet, like they detect American stealth airplanes by exploding suddenly. So So that would be a goal, is to show the Chinese that your capabilities are less than you think they are, and our capabilities are greater than you think they are. So maybe 2027 isn't a realistic date for you to go into Taiwan, because it isn't going to go the way you think. So that would be an American goal in some of these operations.
Okay, yeah, I think similar things happened in Venezuela in that operation also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So, all right, the next position in this thesis here is that Trump knows that he's basically being, strong-armed, blackmailed, leveraged by the Sunni Gulf states and Israel to send American troops to fight Iran, and he resents this. So one of the things about Trump being a boomer is that he loves Israel. And the other thing about Trump being a boomer is that he loves them troops. And I think those two loves have kind of have collided in this scenario. Yeah. And I don't think he's feeling real cozy about the whole situation. And I think he resents what he sees as sort of an entrapment by people that are supposed to be our allies, and for whom we have been keeping the peace in that region at great expense for a long time.
Yeah, and also
Main-
he might love Israel, but he doesn't necessarily love Netanyahu.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Those two concepts are separable. Netanyahu is a guy. The Likud party is a particular party. You know, the defense strategy or the strategies that they're pursuing in the region, especially regarding their relationship with us, are separable from the nation state of Israel. So, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think what we know about Trump's personality is that anybody trying to exercise leverage over him and force him into a situation he doesn't want to be in, he's going to resent that to an extreme degree and feel like it's an insult or a challenge that must be answered. So I'm getting a little psychological with Trump, but that's really how I read him. And so the other thing, and we talked about this on our last conversation about the 2025 defense strategy, is that the U.S. is now an energy exporter in a way that was not true in the 90s and 2000s. But in that time, we were very dependent on Middle East oil.
Yeah.
And so when this Iranian strategy of shutting the strait, when it was written, all those guys are old, right? I think they got a little groupthink going on. They're kind of stuck living in the past. They're still thinking that we're dependent on that energy that comes out of there. But the reality today is that we're actually a major energy exporter again. We've greatly increased the capacity of our crude oil exports, and most importantly, recently, our liquefied natural gas exports.
Right.
And after the Nord Stream pipeline detonated in Europe, it became, I think the writing was on the wall that America is now going to be the LNG supplier par excellence globally, and we have done it. So in that build out of that infrastructure started back in 2018 or something, and it's continued, and there's a lot of it still waiting to be built out and deployed. And so as that export capacity grows, our ability to not only meet our own needs with our own energy, but also meet everybody else's needs with our energy are much greater than they were a couple of decades ago. And so I think what Trump discovered in thinking about this problem is that it's actually not such a big deal anymore if Hormuz closes, not for America. And It's actually beneficial for America. So we'll probably talk a little bit more about that. But the underlying principle there is that cheap energy, access and control of cheap energy, has always been the longest lever of geopolitics. And he also knows that China is energy poor. They don't have crude oil. They don't have natural gas in their territory. They have to buy it on the open market. This is very important to understand what's happening. And then when you factor in things like our new defense MOU with is it with Indonesia?
Yeah.
That's another crucial energy choke point on the map.
Right.
For China. Yeah, the Straits of Malacca. So there are a lot of things moving around this axis of control of cheap energy. And this principle is true going back, if you think about it, going back time immemorial. I mean, what is farmland? It's a way to harness the cheap energy of the sun and the rain to make.
That's a great point.
Right? What was the British Empire? It was the British Navy. What is the sea? The sea and the wind of the sea are cheap energy to move goods around the planet quickly.
Right.
So if you have control of the sea and the wind as your cheap energy source, and you have more control over that than everybody else because you have a great navy and you can blow up their ships, then you have incredible geopolitical leverage and power. So cheap energy, the whole concept goes way on back. It's not just about oil. So Trump's big, real main position here is he wants to secure the U.S.'s position as global energy leader, exporter number one, without a close second. This is his number one goal in everything that's been going on since before Venezuela. Okay. And then there's a little side nugget that I think plays into this, is that I think Trump actually likes Russia in theory.
Yeah.
And considers them a natural competitor rather than an enemy.
Yes.
And he sees more value in cooperation with Russia than he does with EU or NATO, who frankly have completely emasculated themselves.
Right. They have nothing to offer.
No, they have nothing to offer. And think about Russia. Russia is a post-globalist society. They did the Soviet Union thing. They did the international leftist thing. It collapsed. They learned their hard lesson. They're a nationalistic, pragmatic sort of people. And I think Trump has those same inclinations. Whereas Western Europe is still completely globo homo. And so the stark contrast there, I think we're going to see through this by the time we reach the end of it, and we're already seeing a little bit in some of the sanctions waivers and other things that maybe we're cooperating with Russia a little bit. We're going to see that attitude towards Russia sort to soften as compared to the Biden years. So, okay, so I've taken you through what I think Trump's motivations and positions are. How do you can react to any of that? What do you?
I definitely agree with that. And I think that it is interesting to me. I mean, there's a couple of things about this that I found kind of darkly ironic, because as we all know from our current cultural context, Trump is frequently characterized as an idiot and as a buffoon, and all the things. Some of it with maybe not the idiot part, but the buffoon part with his public persona in that. But though I don't hate it, but the whole, his presentation is obviously not conventional. But he is actually, all the stuff he's doing with the control of the flow of energy, and looking at transit, making moves to secure militarily and diplomatically the major choke points for global trade, particularly for global energy trade. All of this stuff, I mean, that's classic geopolitics. That's international relations 101. That is very in keeping with the historical norm for the way the world works, and his intellectual and cultural betters that spend so much energy on deriding his intellect and all that. They were like anti-politics in some sense. We will allow our geopolitical enemies to gain control of the major sources of energy. We will ship our productive capacity to the country and locate it within the borders of our number one geopolitical rival, and things like that. Just, absolute boneheaded. You think one can get into the motives later, but just, at least from the point of view of the United States government, absolutely stupid and self-destructive things. But these are the smart people that do it. And you can see Europe is still stuck in that.
Yeah.
And now they're reaping in Canada. And Canada's even more appalling in this regard, because now they're reaping the benefit, or they're reaping the fruits of that, because the Europeans don't have anything to offer. They don't have an advantageous position. They don't have energy. They very rapidly don't have the industry anymore. They don't have military power. And then what's left? Intellectual property. Well, that's gone now too. That the learning has migrated mostly off the continent, so they don't have that. So they really don't have anything to offer in that regard, and yet they still pursue these policies, and they haven't adjusted to the new norming. Canada, in a way, is even worse, because they have the European mindset, but they do have energy. They've got enormous energy reserves and other natural resources, and yet they squander all of that, which is it.
They might be ours before too long.
Well, right. So, but so that's interesting to me to see that. And then, and it was, Trump of all people that sort of brought this return to the old days, right? The old days of recognize, you actually have a government that recognizes the importance of energy. You have a government that recognizes the importance of industry and so on and so forth. So I find that really interesting. I think you're right about his goals and his feelings. Obviously, we talked about the national security strategy, and all of that's called out about basically you could sum it up by saying it's a call to restore resilience to the United States, resilience to the American nation. And I think that really does fit with his boomer mentality. He grew up when American industry was the top of the world. He grew up when America was, if not, maybe not autarkic, but it wasn't reliant so much on other countries. The heyday of the boomers had kind of gone, or at least that generation. By the time the oil shocks came, that was in the early 70s and then beyond, and we're already kind of on the downward slope. So he's got a memory of, when everything was shiny and new and we were powerful and all that. And it certainly seems like his theme has always been to sort of restore us to that position.
Yeah, the new golden age it's new because there was an old golden age.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me run you through what I think is the actual plan and sequence of events. And I haven't, as the history has proceeded before us, I haven't been updating this, so I'm not sure how accurate it's going to be, but we'll try it. So basically, Trump has decided that keeping the peace in the Middle East so that the Saudis can sell their energy really cheaply is no longer a very good investment for America. So if they and the Israelis are going to try to strong arm us into getting into a war, and by starting one, he's going to let them. And what has happened over the last 6 weeks? Very large amounts of energy infrastructure in the Gulf states has been damaged, destroyed, taken offline. We're talking about storage, export terminals, refining capacity, natural gas liquefaction. Natural gas liquefaction, that's like the air separation units at those places are like 5-6 year lead times. Wow. And the order books are full. So if those sites have all been damaged by drones, they're not going to spin that right back up real quickly. They're going to have partial. Let's say the straight peace were declared in Strait Roper today. They would have partial return to production, but it's not going to be like it was. Not close. They're going to be probably 40-50% offline. Okay. So what does that do for America? That puts us in the position to capture that business. So energy companies sign long-term contracts with their customers. So if you're a major power, you're a major energy user, it's in your interest to sign long-term contracts for your energy supplies so that you don't have to buy in the spot market. You get a better deal. The pricing doesn't fluctuate as much. So this 6-week period that has elapsed, lots and lots of people are signing energy supply agreements with U.S. energy providers at terms which are very favorable to the U.S. energy companies because of the market conditions. Right. But they're gonna sign them because they don't know when this thing's going to be over, and everybody's panicking trying to secure their position. So our now the Middle East, who is now viewed as our competitor in the energy market, they've all destroyed each other's stuff. Okay. And their main export route is blocked. So the other thing that's producing is an energy crisis for China. I think Trump is making a point here. Venezuela was the first point, and this is the second point, that we can choke them out in about 6 weeks on energy, and their industrial base cannot operate through an energy crisis the way that ours can, because they don't have any energy within their borders, none to speak of. And so, they've tried to use rare earth minerals, and they're their industrial capacity and their position as an exporter of a lot of consumer goods. The microchip industry in Taiwan, all these things they're trying to use as leverage over us. And what Trump's saying is actually, we have quite a bit of leverage over you because we can choke you the heck out real fast by shutting down a few energy corridors.
Yeah, you can't produce chips if there's no electricity to power your factories.
Yep, that's right. We'll turn the lights out on you. So the other thing that I think is happening right now that's part of this plan is that, and we've already talked about this a little bit, is that the leverage that the Middle East was presumed to have over us is now being publicly demonstrated as it is no more. They have no more leverage.
Right.
Because it was very clear that the object of their leverage was to get us into a boots on the ground regime change war in Iran. That has not occurred, and I don't think it's going to occur. If it does occur, then everything I've talked about is completely wrong.
I don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening either, because Trump has made it very clear by his actions. We can outlast all of you people in this scenario. So the Brent WTI energy spread is $10. So the rest of the world is paying $10 more per barrel than we are for crude oil. We're sitting pretty. We have a very low energy cost basis right now, all the way through this crisis relative to the rest of the world. I know gas is expensive, but this is where we were, during the Obama administration. We had high gas prices.
Right.
Oil was up at similar prices to it is now. So it's not, and it wasn't the end of the world for us then either. But now, because this is really the focus of the whole scenario, I think the point is being very clearly made that we if you want to play chicken with us, we can do this all day. And I think probably the last thing is he's been very out and proud about this, is he's demonstrating the pointlessness of NATO and our alliances with European countries. The appropriate relationship with them now is vassal and lord, not allies. Because the idea about part of the benefit of being an ally with somebody is that it precludes you getting into a war with them, right? You're forming an alliance, you're making a deal. It's like, we are friends officially, and we're not going to attack each other, and we're going to protect each other from others. Europe can't protect us from anybody, and if we had a fight with them, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves against us. We would roll over them easily.
Yep.
So what the idea that we should be in an alliance with Europe is it doesn't meet the definition of an alliance. And I think he's going to lay that out here for us.
Alliances are, and this is what, there's one of the things that I won't say much about this, but I just want to point it out that too many people who are, at least have the mental capacity to be smart enough to understand, but they don't, for various reasons, don't understand that politics, international politics, is not an exercise in some kind of construed morality, right? Like you come up with a catalog of shoulds, and then everyone abides by it. The world doesn't work like that. I mean, real life doesn't work like that. But in this case, the reality is that alliances are something between equals, right? Or between near equals. And equals not in the sense that, well, the Lord God said we're all equal, and no. Equals, and you have to be of roughly similar, strength and capacity and so on. It's an agreement between peers. Like, together, if you're more or less peers, together we're stronger, and so on and so forth. But if we're not peers, like I'm a giant and you're a midget, you can't have an alliance on that basis, because there's no equal. Like, as you pointed out, the little guy can't protect you. You can't protect your alliance partner, no matter what, even if you were willing to do. And in return, you're basically getting everything as a favor from if you're the little guy, from your powerful partner, and that's not really an equal term. And then in that kind of unequal relationship, eventually sanity is going to exert itself or make itself known in one way or the other, then it becomes, I'm providing you a service, and now you owe me something in return for this, since you can't be my equal and provide me with equal defense or something that magnifies my capabilities. Now you have to pay tribute. Now you have to pay me tribute, either through, treasure or through service, just like in the old days. And that's the characteristic of that relationship. And that hasn't been caught up to yet. Like our outraged former allies in Europe mentally, at least, consider themselves to be equals, and they're outraged by this. But I don't, it's baffling me to see, given the sheer number of institutes for international studies and academics, this and that, who have a lot of smart people who have studied history, that they don't understand that, right? They don't understand.
Yeah.
This was a British guy, Lord Palmerston, who said, you don't have permanent friends or enemies, only interests, right? And now, since the character of the relationship between the U.S. and Europe has shifted so dramatically since the Cold War, and for them to be surprised that the nature of the relationship between the U.S. and Europe has shifted, it's surprising. And unfortunately, the way people inform themselves about the world, there's a lot of, they do not understand. People do not, and I've seen smart people, like in social media, who have some kind of exalted position. They don't understand the magnitude of the disparity now. They don't understand, particularly on the European side, the degree to which those capabilities have degraded into almost nothing. Like I remember in 2011, I read the German Defense Ministry white paper on the state of their armed forces. This is 15 years ago. And it was absolutely dire. It was, they had, at that time, they had something just under double digits of operational fighter aircraft. Their Navy had 13 ships, all of 13 ships that could put to sea. They had fewer tanks in their army than a U.S. that were operational and prepared, ready for war, than like a U.S. one armor brigade in the U.S. Army had. So all of this stuff, and it's worse now, right? Because now all their support, their supplies, the equipment that went into storage, the arsenals, all the shells and bombs and missiles and things that they had, all that went to Ukraine, has been expended, and they shuttered the productive capacity to replace it. So they, now there's talk, well, they're going to rearm, they're going to do this. It will take, assuming they're serious about that, and I don't think they are, it will take decades to replace that capacity. But people don't really have an appreciation for how weak Europe is. So I think you're absolutely right. That now this is a vassal lord, or a lord tributary type of situation. And, that's the underlying reality of it. On the rhetoric level, it hasn't caught up to that yet, but it is now. We're seeing the correction in real time.
Well, the tribute that they're going to pay is buying our LNG to run their society on, and they're going to pay a premium.
Exactly. At a much higher rate than what they would have gotten out of Nord Stream, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, their energy basis has tripled. That's actually that's fait accompli. The energy cost basis in Europe is triple what it was prior to the Ukraine war, and it's not going back. This is a done deal. So yeah, I there are a lot of energy intensive companies in Europe that export to the US that are really working hard to wind down operations in Europe and build them up in the US, because they can't compete. They'll lose money. So if you want to sell in the US, you got to make it in the US now, because the entire energy cost basis picture has changed.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. It's not even a regulatory thing. It's a cost of manufacturing.
Yep. Yep, those pipelines of that cheap gas from Russia, man, they were doing great with that. And it's funny how they cheered their own destruction. Like Europeans were
Yes.
cheering about the severance of cheap Russian energy it flows to their civilization, and they were jumping up and down in the similar way that the Gulf states and Israel were trying to escalate a war that was actively destroying their energy infrastructure. And the only solution that they could come to was escalate, because they thought, the end of it will destroy Iran for them, and we're not going to do it. So anyway, I guess we can kind of start landing this plane here, but I wanted to pop a few ideas in here. If this thesis is correct, here's what we're going to start seeing. The Strait of Hormuz will not open. It won't open soon, and we're not going to appear to be in a big hurry to open it. There's going to be threats and drama, and there might be a few things blowing up here and there. We're going to board ships, but the blockade for both parties is probably going to continue for a while, because we're fine with this, actually. But there will be no ground invasion. So long-term conflict in that area, no actual U.S. invasion of Iran. Second thing that I think will happen, if I'm correct here, we're going to see, and this is already occurring now. I mean, I wrote this a while ago. We're going to see massive increases in exports of U.S. energy, oil, LNG, petrochemical fuel. The North Sea fields Europe could come to their senses and decide to ramp those back up, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't see how they do it with the political situation.
No, they're going to have. That's where they need a regime change. Honestly, it's Europe if they're gonna return to any kind of sanity. So that could happen in the future, but it's not going to happen near term. So the other thing we're going to see is China taking a very active role in these negotiations, and that's what this whole thing. This is a negotiation, and it's making a point. I think it's true. I've seen some reporting, and I believe it, that China is the one that keeps pushing Iran back to the negotiating table.
Right.
I think now that we're blockading the strait too, I think that Iran will have its own reasons to negotiate, but the initial force behind Iran and first coming to the table in the initial ceasefire, I think was definitely China. Because China, the first thing they did when this kicked off was export controls on refined energy products like gasoline and diesel and all this stuff.
Right.
Because I think they realized pretty quickly what was happening, and they didn't know how long it was going to go. And they're thinking, we have to keep fuel. And they have a bunch of petroleum, so they don't have it on the ground, but they do store large amounts of crude oil and energy resource materials. And even with that, even with their huge stockpiles, they still immediately locked down on exports because they freaked out, which is why America has been able to pick up so much extra business, is because China honestly reacted out of fear to this. Let's see. Okay, covered export controls. And then I think probably in May, this thing is going to wind down. This is a negotiation. I think Trump wants it to be over by about May, because we're going to see a narrative shift in May, and Iran will be forgotten, and we're going to be talking about domestic things real soon. And maybe we could talk about what domestic things we might hear about in May on our next conversation.
Yes, I think that would be a great subject for the next seance. The only thing that was a great summary, Ghost Snack. One thing I just wanted to add to that was the interesting thing to me, and I'm wondering how this is going to unwind, is on the internal side in Iran, because there's obviously the people are there on the Iranian side to put this to bed and to make a deal and move forward. But you've got, roughly speaking, two major factions. You've got moderates that want to put an end to this and move on to whatever comes next. But then you've got the IRGC, you've got the hardliners that have that entire infrastructure, frankly, oppressive and brutal infrastructure that has been, almost like a state. I hate doing like, Nazi time parallels because it's obviously so over. But in some kind of analog to SS, the IRGC was kind of a state within a state. Because they have their own parallel armed forces to the main Iranian ones. They've got all these state businesses and things that are through the IRGC. And these guys, I think, are the ones that have been foiling having a deal because the peace won't be very kind to them across a whole number of fronts. Both from the financial business side of it to, if they're weakened, I think they feel like they're probably riding the tiger the way they've conducted themselves, and that if they are weakened and things have to get calmer on that front, that there's going to be other factions that want to take revenge on them. I think it's been them that have really been torpedoing a deal to this date. But now you've got, as you point out, there's a lot of external players now, strong ones like the Chinese, that have an interest in pushing a resolution to this. And I'm wondering how that loose end will get tied up. So interesting times.
Your analysis of the political situation in Iran is very important, because people do need to understand there's a civil government that we're negotiating with, and then there's a political party that has a huge army and domestic intelligence apparatus of its own, that is its own political interest within the nation that we're not interacting with. And so the government of Iran, the civil government of Iran, doesn't have it doesn't speak for all the interests of the nation. It just speaks for what it can control, but it doesn't control everything, including most of the military assets. I think that the civil government basically maintains an army, but all other military equipment and resources and personnel are part of the IRGC. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So people need to understand that country is not, they're not speaking with a unified voice, and you're exactly right. The peace will not be kind to them in sort of a similar situation that Zelensky's in. Yeah. The peace is not going to be kind to him either. Yeah. In both cases, neither one of them want to stop the war. So, well, cool. This has been a really fun chat, a little bit shorter tonight, but I appreciate you jumping on with me and letting me kind of walk through my fun little thesis here.
Oh yeah, man. It was great. I will put a ribbon on this and send it to Suo and Kavi.
Very good. All right. Well, we'll catch you on the next time.
All right. See ya.